Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to my vegetable garden and to this week's installment of my Everyone Can Grow a Garden video series. Today is an exciting day because I'm going to plant a postage stamp garden. What's that, you say? Well, I feel so strongly that everyone should know how to grow their own food, but I think a lot of folks feel that you need a lot of room and you need a lot of time, but neither of those are the case. Now, yes, I do have a huge vegetable garden, but to illustrate my point that you don't need much room, I have dedicated this 3-foot wide by 8-foot long raised bed, and in it I'm going to plant tomatoes, zucchini, and green beans. And it will be very productive, but just in 24 square feet of space. Now I'm going to take you through all the steps, and they're very simple. So let's plant a postage stamp garden. Let's talk soil prep first. What I did to prepare this bed for planting was I gently loosened the soil. And I use a spading fork, but you could easily use a shovel instead. You don't need anything fancy. And I just push it down into the soil, wiggle it back and forth, put it in another spot, wiggle it, and so on. That's all there is to it. You do not need to turn all the soil over because A, that's a heck of a lot of work, isn't it? And B, it's really hard on the structure of the soil, so just leave it be and just be gentle with it. The next thing I did is I went to a garden center and I bought some organic vegetable fertilizer and I applied it to the soil. You want to make sure that you read the label directions so that you use the right proportions for your size of garden bed. And also you will find as we go through the season that I do everything organically, and I hope that you are interested in doing that too. Now the next thing I wanted to cover was watering. You've probably noticed I have a drip irrigation system on the top of the bed. Now you can do that, but you don't have to go to that much trouble. The best alternative would be to use a soaker hose, and you just would snake it around on the top of the bed and it will deliver water right to the surface of the soil, which is ideal. You could also use a sprinkler. But I do know that everybody is short on time and there isn't always time to water a garden. But a vegetable garden needs regular water. So one thing you could do is go to a home center and buy a battery-operated automatic sprinkler timer. And just set it for the same time every day or every few days for just a few minutes, and then the watering's done and you don't have to worry about it. The next thing I wanted to cover is sunlight. For any vegetable garden to do well, it needs at least 6 hours of sunlight a day. And another thing is the orientation of where your garden is. So in this garden, the sun comes up in the east and goes across to the west. And so that makes me think about plants potentially shading others as the sun moves in the sky. And so what I want to do is I want to plant the shortest veggies up to the tallest. And that way, hopefully, there will not be a shading issue. So what I'm going to do with the example of the 3 veggies I'm growing, the tomato, zucchini, and bush beans, I'm going to plant the short guys, which will be the bush beans. They'll be about maybe this tall. Then I will plant my zucchini, and then I will plant the tomato, because the tomato will probably grow 4 or 5 feet tall. So make sure you think about that when you're getting ready to plant. Okay, we finally get to start planting. And even though I talked about planting the shortest plants up to the tallest, when I'm doing the planting, I'm going to plant the veggies that need the most room first. So in this case, that would be the tomato. Now, tomatoes do need good support, and that's because if they have nice air circulation all around them, the tomatoes will ripen better. If you have them sprawling on the ground, there's the potential for rot and some types of diseases. So I heartily recommend using either a tomato cage or a stake of some sort that's nice and strong. Now, do not, I repeat, do not buy a tomato cage that's a little one like this. By the time you press it into the soil and plant your plant and it's grown maybe 2 feet, it's going to topple over and it will drive you insane. So get a large tomato cage. Now we built this one, it's 2 feet in diameter and it's made from just leftover field fence, and so it's about 4 feet tall. And it's very sturdy, nice large openings in order to go in and pick hopefully, some ripe tomatoes. So this is what I'm going to use, and I'm actually even going to add a stake to it to make sure that it is nice and stable. Now the reason I'm putting the cage in before I plant the tomato is because it's much easier to do it this way rather than risk decapitating your plant. This is the tomato that I'm going to put into this garden. It is Sun Gold, which is my all-time favorite cherry tomato. But there's so many great varieties out there, so make sure you pick the one that you will enjoy the most. The first thing I have to do before I plant this is to trim off very carefully with a pair of scissors these lowest branches up to here. That's because I'm going to be planting it deeply, and that will encourage additional root growth along the stem. That will make a much more vigorous plant. I've got those lower branches cut off. I've set it down into the hole, and then I'm just moving the soil around it and pressing in to make sure there aren't any air pockets. And that's it. This is the zucchini that I'm going to grow, and actually I'm just growing one plant, but I love this variety. It's called Clarimore, and my other favorite is Romanesco. Now you might be able to find some zucchini starts in a garden center, or you might need to start them from seed, but they're so easy to grow from seed, so don't worry about that. So I am very carefully going to separate these two because I'm just putting the one in this bed. And then it's got a pretty long stem, so I'm going to plant it a little bit more deeply. And that's so it won't get whipped around in the wind. And same thing, you always press in the soil around something that you've planted so you don't have any air pockets around the roots. That's never a good thing. And there it is. Now I'm going to plant the bean seeds. And you know, it's pretty hard to find bean seedlings in a nursery, so just buy a packet of seeds. And I do have a little tip for you to get the best possible germination or sprouting of the seeds. You know, beans are kidney shaped, and there's a little scar at the indentation, and if you point that scar facing downward, you will have the best possible germination. I'm planting the seeds about 1/2 inch deep and 6 to 8 inches apart. And then I will just cover them over and press the soil so the seeds make good contact with the soil. Okay, everything is planted, which is very exciting. And I did want to mention one thing. You may have noticed there's some onion plants down on the end of this bed, and that's because I had a few spares from planting them elsewhere and I just poked them in there. So you probably have room for putting in lettuce or some other kind of veggie. And if you don't like some of the veggies that I've planted, by all means substitute them with something else. Now, if you have any questions along the way, if you run into any kind of problems and you're wondering about an organic solution, please do drop me a note at susan@susansinthegarden.com. Now, be sure to water everything in well. And also, one thing you might do to save yourself time and grief later is I would recommend putting down a mulch, and that will help impede weed growth, which would be great, and it also helps the soil retain moisture. Examples of this would be grass clippings from an untreated lawn. That's a lawn that has not had any chemicals like weed and feed put onto it. Or you could use shredded leaves or straw, something along those lines. I'll see you in a week.